Unnecessary complication. Alberto seemed devastated. I didn't know, Eduardo, I swear on the memory of our daughter, Elena. You did know, or at least you suspected, Danilo interrupted as he opened his briefcase. He pulled out a small leather-bound notebook that Eduardo immediately recognized, Elena's diary, found among her belongings after the accident, but that he had never had the courage to read. We found this among Mr. Mendez's possessions, Danilo explained. The last entries are particularly revealing. Eduardo took the diary with trembling hands and read aloud, May 3rd. I found strange documents in Dad's study. My birth certificate has an annotation I had never seen before. Twin, one of two. Do I have a sister or a brother? Why was I never told? May 7th. Mom keeps avoiding my questions. I confronted her directly and she told me not to keep chasing ghosts, but her eyes betrayed her. Is there something more? May 12th. I hired someone to investigate if I have a twin brother. I will find him. I have the right to know. The last entry was from May 15th, 3 days before the accident that took her life. I found her. I have a twin sister. Her name is Luisa Oliveira and she works at a restaurant in La Lapa. Tomorrow I will go see her. I won't tell anyone, not even Eduardo. I want it to be my surprise for him. The silence that followed was so heavy it seemed to have a presence. Physical CIA in the room. Regina had closed her eyes, like, Dad, that waitress looks a lot like Mom, exclaimed Sofia, pointing with her little finger to the other side of the restaurant. Eduardo Mendez looked up from the menu and felt the world stop around him. The blood drained from his face as he slowly turned to look in the direction his 5-year-old daughter was pointing. And there she was, like a ghost made flesh. The same face he had kissed 1,000 times. The same blue eyes that had looked at him with love for 10 years. And the same smile that had disappeared forever that rainy night 3 years ago. It can't be, Eduardo murmured, spilling the glass of water on the table. The waitress approached upon noticing the small accident, holding an empty tray and with a friendly smile that made Eduardo feel like he had been punched in the stomach. Are you ready to order? She asked casually, unaware of the devastating effect she was having on him. Eduardo tried to speak, but the words refused to come out. Beside him, Sofia looked on in astonishment, alternating her gaze between the waitress and the photo of her mother she always carried in a small locket. Are you okay, sir? The woman asked, genuine concern in her voice. Eduardo finally managed to say, You are identical to my deceased wife. The waitress paled, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. I'm so sorry, it was not my intention. No, please, Eduardo interrupted, regaining some composure. You don't have to apologize. In the Apa neighborhood, the neighbors watched with curiosity as the luxurious vehicle, so out of place on that narrow street where most people got around on worn-out motorcycles and crowded buses. Does Aunt Luisa live here? Sofia asked from her safety seat. It seems so, Princess, Eduardo replied, checking the address on his phone. 3 days had passed since their encounter at the restaurant, 3 days in which Eduardo had barely slept, mentally reviewing every detail of his life with Elena, searching for clues he might have overlooked, signs that she knew about his twin sister. Luisa was waiting for them at the entrance, dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, but her resemblance to Elena was so striking that Eduardo had to make a conscious effort not to stare at her. Thank you for coming, she said, clearly nervous. My apartment is not very big. Don't worry, Eduardo interrupted. We just want to talk. The apartment was indeed small. A living dining room connected to an open kitchen. Gastronomy books were stacked on every available surface, and a small collection of plants struggled to receive light from the only window. Do you like cooking? Sofia asked, pointing at the books. I study gastronomy, Luisa replied, smiling. Someday I would like to have my own. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Luisa told them about her childhood with adoptive parents on the outskirts of Sao Paulo. Every small gesture, the way her eyebrows arched slightly, was identical, but there were also differences. Her hair was shorter and darker, her hands showed small scars from hard work, and her clothing was simple, in contrast to the designer clothes Elena used to wear. My wife died 3 years ago, Eduardo said, his voice barely a whisper. In a car accident. She never mentioned having a twin sister. Maybe she didn't know, Luisa replied, tears forming in her eyes. I have been searching for my sister for years, but I never had enough information. From the kitchen, a voice called out to Luisa. The restaurant manager was looking at her impatiently. I had to get back to work, she said, getting up quickly. But we could talk later. Yes, of course, Eduardo replied, unable to say more words. As Luisa walked away, Eduardo felt Sofia's small hand squeezing his. Dad, can we see Aunt Luisa again? Eduardo looked at his daughter, seeing in her blue eyes the same eyes as Alina's, the same eyes as Luisa's, a hope that had been absent for too long. Yes, princess, he finally replied. I think we have a lot to talk about with her. What none of them could imagine was how this chance encounter on a Sunday anyone would change their lives forever, uncovering buried family secrets for decades and opening wounds that had never truly healed. Eduardo's Mercedes-Benz S-Class came to a stop in front of the modest apartment building. Behind its facade, there was vulnerability. I suppose you'll soon be moving to a penthouse in Higienopolis and forgetting about this place and me, Marcelo said. Don't be ridiculous, Luisa replied, although a part of her wondered how her life would change with this revelation. I just want to know the truth about my origins, about who my sister was. Marcelo stared at her. Be careful, Luisa. The rich play by different rules, and family secrets can be dangerous. What neither of them knew was how prophetic those words would turn out to be. The Montenegro mansion in the Morumbi neighborhood stood as a testament to the power and wealth accumulated over decades. Eduardo rang the doorbell, taking a deep breath to prepare himself. Beside him, Danilo Vasconcelos remained serious, holding his leather briefcase. A butler led them through corridors adorned with European art to a room where Regina Montenegro awaited them, seated like a queen on her throne. At her age, Regina maintained the elegance and toughness that had made her a pioneer in the banking world. Eduardo, what a surprise, she said, without getting up. I don't recall scheduling a meeting. Familiar. And who is this gentleman? Regina, we need to talk about Elena, Eduardo replied, deliberately ignoring the protocol that his mother-in-law valued so much. Specifically about her adoption and her twin sister. Regina's face momentarily lost color, but she quickly regained her composure. I don't know what you're talking about. Luisa worked as a waitress to pay for her studies while unsuccessfully searching for her twin sister for years. My adoptive parents, Raimundo and Jerima, were always honest about my adoption, she explained. However, they knew very little, only that a nurse had told them that I was one of two twins and that the other baby had been adopted by a wealthy family. Eduardo listened attentively, comparing that story with what little he knew about Elena's origins. The Montenegros, his in-laws, had always been extremely secretive about their daughter's adoption. Elena grew up as an only child, Eduardo said. Regina and Alberto Montenegro adopted her as a newborn and never mentioned a twin sister. I have some photos, Luisa said, taking out her phone. From when she was little. The images showed a young version of Elena, Luisa, in humble settings. A backyard with laundry hanging, a public school, modest Christmas celebrations. It was a world completely opposite to the mansions, private schools, and European vacations that had been Elena's reality. I have to hire someone, Eduardo suddenly said. An investigator to verify all of this. You don't believe me, Luisa retorted, furrowing her brow in a way so similar to Elena when she was angry that Eduardo felt a shiver. It's not that, but there are too many unanswered questions. Why were they separated? Why did the Montenegros never mention your existence? If you really are Elena's sister, that means you are Fami. Elena was our only daughter. We both know that's not true, Eduardo insisted. I met Luisa Oliveira. The resemblance is undeniable. Regina pressed her lips together, assessing Danilo with her gaze. This man is Danilo Vasconcelos, a private investigator, Danilo introduced himself. We are reconstructing the story of the Oliveira Montenegro sisters. The what? Alberto Montenegro's voice echoed from the door. Unlike his wife, the 70-year-old patriarch had visibly aged since Elena's death. His hair was completely white and his posture slightly stooped. What are you talking about? It seems your wife has some explaining to do, Eduardo replied. Alberto approached slowly, with genuine confusion on his face. Regina, what is all this about? Regina sighed, defeated for the first time in decades. Sit down, Alberto. This might affect your heart. Over the next hour, Regina revealed a truth kept hidden for 30 years. Elena had been one of two identical twins. The babies had been separated. For administrative convenience, as Regina explained with clinical coldness. The adoption agency only offered us one of the girls, she said. It was easier to place them separately. We were given priority due to our social status. And did you never think that Elena had the right to know about her sister? Eduardo's voice trembled with indignation. Why? Regina replied. So she could become obsessed with searching for a stranger? So she could question her place in our family? We protected her from an unnecessary burden. Here is the improved excerpt. I'm sorry for the confusion, it's just that. The resemblance is unsettling, Eduardo explained, his voice quivering. That's my mom, Sophia intervened with the brutal innocence of a child. Did you become a waitress when you went to heaven? The woman looked at Sophia with a mix of compassion and bewilderment before turning her attention back to Eduardo, who seemed on the verge of fainting. My name is Luisa Oliveira, she finally said, setting down the tray and taking a seat in an empty chair, completely forgetting her role as a waitress. Although it may sound strange, I was adopted as a baby and always knew I had a twin sister. The Cantinho restaurant in Lisbon, once Eduardo and Alina's favorite place, now spun around them like a frenzied carousel. The coincidence was too perfect, too cruel. He had avoided this place for 3 years after losing Elena, and on the day he finally finds her. So to return with his daughter, he finds himself face to face with the spitting image of his deceased wife. Elena was born on April 12, 1992, Eduardo recited mechanically, as if reading from a file. At São Luís Hospital. Luisa's eyes widened. That's exactly my birth date. And the same hospital. Sophia, unaware of the magnitude of the moment, smiled broadly. That means you're my aunt, she declared with the simple logic of childhood. I have an aunt who looks like my mom. Eduardo watched as Luisa tried to process the information, her face perfectly reflecting the expressions of surprise that Elena used to have. Script revision. **** In his elegant office in the financial district. Eduardo met with Danilo Vasconcelos, a private investigator who had collaborated with him on business matters in the past. I need absolute discretion, Eduardo emphasized after explaining the situation. The Montenegros are powerful people and I don't think they'll appreciate this. Danilo nodded as he took notes. I'll start with birth records, adoption documents, and interviews with retired hospital staff. Do you have any contacts within the Montenegro family who might be more communicative? Eduardo thought of Alberto, his father-in-law, who had always been warmer than Regina. Maybe. Let me lay the groundwork first. Meanwhile, in her apartment, Luisa faced Marcelo's interrogation. Are you going to tell me who that guy in the Mercedes was? He insisted, pacing around the small room. And why was he bringing a little girl? What kind of friendship is that? He's my twin sister's widower, Luisa finally replied. A sister I never knew. And the girl is my niece. Marcelo stopped in his tracks, his expression oscillating between disbelief and confusion. What are you talking about? You never mentioned a twin sister. Because I never found her until now, explained Luisa, or rather, I never found her family. She died 3 years ago. As she told him the whole story, Luisa watched Marcelo's expression change. It was no longer just jealousy, it was something more complex, fear. So now you're related to millionaires. His tone was sarcastic, but there was a clear uncertainty in his voice. Title. Hidden Truths *int. Living room. De Alberto sits pensive, trying to block out the reality around him. Beside him, Eduardo murmurs, his voice barely a whisper. Eduardo, she never got to meet her. Regelina, regaining composure, nods sadly. Regelina, a tragic coincidence. She died before being able to meet her sister. Danilo raises an eyebrow, skeptical. Danilo, was it? The accident happened when Elena was heading to the Apa neighborhood, not to her yoga class in Jardins, as you told the police. Regina turns pale. Regina, that's absurd, I didn't know. Danilo interrupts her firmly. Danilo, the traffic cameras see they confirm their route. And there's something else. The mechanic who checked the vehicle found that the brakes had been tampered with. Eduardo suddenly stands up, alarmed. Eduardo, are you saying it wasn't an accident? That's someone. Danilo, I'm just saying there are unanswered questions. We should talk to everyone who knew that Elena was looking for her sister. Eduardo's gaze fixates on Regina, whose face is now an impassive mask. Regina, this is ridiculous. Are you accusing your wife's family based on absurd conspiracy theories? Eduardo, I'm not accusing anyone yet, but I will find out what really happened to Elena and who is involved. Elsewhere in the city, Luisa receives a message from Eduardo. I found Elena's diary. She was looking for you before she died. The revelation sends shivers down her spine. Something has begun. Fade out. Title: Unexpected Encounter. Int. Luisa's apartment. Day. Sofia, a curious girl, returns to the living room from her exploration of the apartment upon hearing her name. Sofia, I like my Aunt Luisa. She makes the same face as Mom when she's thinking. Suddenly, the doorbell rings, interrupting the moment. Luisa opens the door, revealing Marcelo, a young, athletic man dressed in biker gear. Luisa, uncomfortable. Marcelo, I wasn't expecting you so early. Marcelo enters the apartment, quickly assessing Eduardo and Sofia with a suspicious look. Marcelo, am I interrupting something? He sets his helmet on the kitchen counter. Luisa, Eduardo, Sofia, this is Marcelo, my boyfriend. Softly, Marcelo, they are friends. Eduardo extends his hand. Nice to meet you. Marcelo shakes his hand with more force than necessary. Marcelo, friends from the restaurant? His eyes fix on Eduardo with evident suspicion. Luisa, it's complicated. I'll explain later. The atmosphere visibly tenses. Eduardo looks at his watch, seizing the opportunity. Eduardo, we should go. Takes Sofia's hand, but I'd like to continue this conversation. Can I call you? Luisa nods, accompanying them to the door as Marcelo watches them with his arms crossed. Ext. Luisa's apartment. Day. In the car. Sofia asks curiously. Sofia, why did Aunt Luisa's boyfriend seem angry? Eduardo sighs, starting the engine. Sometimes adults make things complicated, princess. Not everyone understands unusual situations like this. The next day. Revised. The search for identity was turning into something much darker, and at the center of it all was Regina Montenegro, a woman willing to do anything to protect family secrets. The garden of Eduardo's house in Alto de Pineros, for the first time in 3 years, echoed with children's laughter. Sofia chased the bubbles Luis threw into the air, her giggles bouncing off the walls of the mansion, which had known only silence and pain for too long. From the terrace, Eduardo observed. He watched the scene with a mix of emotions. Seeing Sofia so happy warmed his heart, but the image of Luisa, so similar to Elena, playing in the same garden where his wife used to spend her afternoons, gave him an almost unbearable sense of déjà vu. I've never seen the girl so happy, commented Doña Conceição, placing a tray of lemonade next to Eduardo. That girl has a special gift with her. Doña Conceição, the housekeeper who had worked for the Mendez family for over a decade, was the only staff member Eduardo had kept on after Elena's death. More than an employee, she had become a motherly figure to Sofia and a silent confidant to Eduardo. She looks so much like her, Eduardo murmured. Not just physically, her gestures, her way of laughing. But she is not her, the woman replied with practical wisdom. And you must be careful with that, Mr. Eduardo. It's easy to confuse things when the heart is involved. Feeling hurt, the conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Doña Conceição got up to answer it and returned accompanied by Danilo Vasconcelos, whose serious expression contrasted with the joy in the garden. We need to talk, Danilo said, without beating around the bush. Eduardo nodded and led him to his office. Luisa, who had noticed Danilo's arrival, gestured that she would join them in a few minutes. Once in the office, Danilo took out several folders from his briefcase. I have conducted further research. About Marcelo Santos, Luisa's boyfriend, he began. There's something that doesn't add up. Before becoming a ride-sharing driver, he worked as a mechanic in a workshop in Lapa, the same workshop where Elena took her car 3 days before the accident. A shiver ran down Eduardo's spine. Are you suggesting? Eduardo asked, not finishing the sentence. I'm not suggesting anything yet, Danilo clarified. But it's a coincidence worth investigating, especially considering that Marcelo started dating Luisa approximately 6 months after Elena's accident. The door opened, and Luisa entered, her cheeks flushed after playing with Sofia. What are you talking about? She asked, immediately noticing the tension in the room. Eduardo exchanged a look with Danilo, unsure whether to share his suspicions about Marcelo. Finally, he responded. There's something you should know. As Eduardo explained the discovered connection, Luisa's face went from confusion to disbelief and finally to a mix of horror and anger. "That's absurd," she protested. Marcelo wouldn't. Danilo intervened. "We're not accusing anyone, but we need to talk to him. We want to understand why he never mentioned working at the workshop where Elena took her car before she died." Luisa sank into a chair, visibly upset. "This is all madness. 2 weeks ago, my life was normal. Now I find out I had a twin sister who died before I could. They got to know each other and she may have been murdered. Besides, my boyfriend could be involved." Eduardo approached her, unsure of how to comfort her. Before he could say anything, Sofia burst into the office. "Why is everyone so serious?" the girl asked as she ran towards Luisa. "Aunt Luisa, are you sad?" Luisa quickly wiped away a tear and smiled at the girl. "No, sweetheart, I'm just a little tired from playing so much." "Sofia, why don't you show Luisa your seashell collection?" Eduardo suggested, looking for a moment alone with Danilo. When the two of them left, Eduardo turned to the investigator. "What other connections have you found?" "The Montenegros cancelled a significant transfer to an account in the Cayman Islands the day after Elena's funeral," Danilo responded. "And there's more. Alberto is not the biological father of the twins." "What?" Eduardo was left speechless. "I found old medical records. Alberto has a genetic condition that makes him sterile, he always has been." This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the mystery. If Alberto wasn't the biological father, then who was? And what did this have to do with everything else? Nero looked at the cryptic note. His phone rang. It was Danilo. "I'm at the apartment with Luisa," the investigator informed. "We found something interesting. Letters between Marcelo and Regina Montenegro." Eduardo felt the air escape from his lungs. "What do they talk about?" "They are vague, but they mention payments and a task that needed to be done. The most recent one is from a month ago." Eduardo cursed under his breath. The pieces were starting to fit together in a terrifying way. "Keep her safe. I'll be there in 15 minutes. When he finally arrived at Luisa's building, he found Danilo guarding the entrance. Upstairs, in the apartment, Luisa was pale, sitting on the couch, surrounded by papers and photos. "What is all this?" Eduardo asked. "I found it in a box Marcelo kept under the bed," Luisa replied, her voice barely a whisper. "There are photos of me taken before we met, as if he had been following me." Eduardo examined the photographs. Indeed, they showed Luisa at various moments. Leaving the restaurant, walking towards the culinary school, even at the door of the building where she lived before moving in with Marcelo. "This was no coincidence," he said, sitting next to her. "He deliberately sought you out. Why? I don't understand. What do I have to do with the Montenegros?" Eduardo exchanged a glance with Danilo before answering. "I think Regina saw you as a threat, or perhaps as a safeguard. If Elena found out the truth about her sister, Regina might need a way to control the situation." Title: The Web of Secrets int. Eduardo's apartment. Night. Eduardo, with a furrowed brow, looks through old photo albums. He stops at an image he had never noticed before. Elena, pregnant with Sofia, with her parents at their summer house. In the background, a house. Imperceptibly, an older man, perhaps an employee, watches Elena with an expression that Eduardo now interprets as longing. Eduardo remembers something Elena had once said. "Sometimes I feel like my father looks at me as if I were a stranger." Suddenly, the phone interrupts his thoughts. It's Luisa. Her voice trembles. "Luisa, Eduardo, Marcelo is not here. He left a note saying he has to resolve something. And there is money missing from our savings. Eduardo, don't do anything. I'm on my way. Call Danilo." Eduardo hangs up, feeling the web of secrets becoming denser. The unsettling feeling of danger looms over everyone, especially over Luisa, the last link in a chain that someone desperately wants to break. Streets of Sao Paulo. Night. The rain falls relentlessly on the city, turning the streets into rivers and the traffic into complete chaos. Eduardo, behind the wheel of his Mercedes, impatiently taps the steering wheel as he slowly makes his way towards Luisa's apartment. Luisa's call has left him unsettled and worried. Revised excerpt. **** Luisa stood up determined. "I'm coming with you. It's dangerous, but she's my niece too," she asserted firmly. "I won't hide while my family is in danger." The word family resonated between them. In just 2 weeks, they had gone from being complete strangers to being bound by ties stronger than blood. A shared secret, a shared pain, and now a shared danger. As they headed to the house, Danilo received another call. "We have confirmation. Elena's car was sabotaged. The brake system was professionally manipulated." "Marcelo?" Eduardo asked, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. "Probably. He used to work as a specialized mechanic in brake systems before, coincidentally, meeting Luisa." Everything fit into a terrible puzzle. Regina had found out that Elena knew about her twin sister's existence. Elena planned to meet with Luisa and then, accidentally, her car's brakes failed at the precise moment. And now, 3 years later, the story threatened to repeat itself. "Why now?" Luisa asked. If Regina managed to hide all this for 3 years, why panic now? "The diary," Eduardo replied. "I never read it until Danilo found it. And there's something else there, something we haven't fully discovered yet." "The real father," Danilo murmured. Elena mentioned several times that she was investigating who her real father was. "If Alberto is not the biological father of the twins, then who is?" Luisa added, leaving the question hanging in the air. On the terrace, a bottle of wine rested between them. The silence was comfortable, as if they had known each other all their lives. Finally, Luisa broke the silence. "Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to meet Elena," she said. Eduardo gave a sad smile. She was passionate. Wave after wave, determined like no other. She didn't stop when she wanted something. "Like finding your lost sister," Luisa murmured. "Like finding you," Eduardo nodded. His gaze filled with a silent implication. Elena had died seeking the truth. Were they in the same danger? "I won't let them hurt Sofia," Luisa said fiercely. "Or you." Eduardo looked at her, surprised by the intensity of her declaration. In that moment, the resemblance to Elena was so deep it hurt, but there was something unique about Luisa, something entirely her own, a strength forged in circumstances different from those that had shaped her sister. "I won't let them hurt you either. I already lost one Oliveira, I won't lose another." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, something more than shared pain floated between them, something neither was ready to name. Meanwhile, at the Albert Einstein Hospital, the most exclusive in São Paulo, Regina Montenegro received the deference reserved for the most prestigious patients. A private room overlooking Ibirapuera Park, a dedicated medical team, and discreet security to keep the curious at bay. Alberto Montenegro sat by his wife's bedside, his face. Spy in my life. Marcelo had pretended to love her for 2 years, only to spy on her. The revelation hit Luisa with devastating force, causing her to double over. Eduardo wanted to comfort her, but the words ran out. They failed. How to ease such betrayal? Danilo's phone rang, breaking the silence. "I have to take this," he said, stepping out into the hallway. Eduardo took the opportunity to show Luisa the latest entries from Elena's diary. "She was looking for you, Luisa. She had discovered your existence and wanted to meet you. She had a plan." Luisa read the pages with trembling hands, tears silently rolling down her cheeks. "She died trying to find me," she whispered, "and now I understand why Regina never wanted us to meet." Danilo returned with a grave expression. "She was my contact in the police. They found Marcelo's car abandoned near the airport. Also, Regina Montenegro has just been admitted to the hospital. Alberto called emergency services saying she had taken pills." "An attempted suicide?" Eduardo asked, incredulous. "Or a convenient way to avoid questioning," Danilo suggested. Eduardo's phone rang. It was Doña Conciso, alarmed. "Mr. Eduardo, someone broke into the house. They smashed a window in the study. The police are on their way." "Sofia." Fear gripped her voice. "She's okay, I have her with me in my room. We've locked the door. Don't move from there." "I'm coming over," Eduardo said, jumping up and quickly explaining the situation. This was spiraling out of control. Here is an edited version of the excerpt. "What does that have to do with any of this?" he murmured as they reached the mansion. Eduardo's house, where 2 police cars were parked at the entrance. The window of a study was broken, and several officers were taking fingerprints and photographs. Upon seeing them, Sofia ran towards them, throwing herself into her father's arms. "Dad, someone bad entered the house," exclaimed the terrified girl. "Doña Concis hid me in her closet. Eduardo hugged her tightly, silently grateful that she was safe. "What did they take?" he asked one of the officers. "They just rummaged through papers. The study is a mess, but no valuable items are missing," the officer replied. Eduardo and Danilo exchanged glances. They weren't looking for jewelry or money, they were looking for information. Luisa approached Sofia and crouched down to her level. "Hello, princess. Are you okay?" The girl nodded, sniffing. "Aunt Luisa, are you going to stay with us?" "I'm scared." Luisa looked at Eduardo, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes, dear, I'll stay tonight. No one is going to hurt you." At that moment, Eduardo made a decision. "We're not going to wait for Marcelo or Regina to try something else. Tomorrow we'll go to the police with everything we have." "And what about Alberto?" Luisa asked. "If Regina tried to commit suicide, he's alone in the hospital with her." "Danilo, can you send someone to watch over them?" Eduardo requested. "I don't trust either of them right now." That night, with Sofia finally asleep in the house under police surveillance, Eduardo and Luisa they sat down to consider their next steps. Regina began to awaken. Her eyes opened slowly, first focusing on Alberto, then on Eduardo, and finally on Danilo. In an instant, her expression changed from confusion to cold calculation. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was weak, but maintained its characteristic sharpness. "We know everything, Regina," Eduardo said. "About Javier Salinas, how you separated the twins, and how you ordered the murder of Elena when she discovered the truth." Regina smiled a terrible smile that did not reach her eyes. "Prove it." Danilo took a step forward, pulling out his phone. "We have Marcelo Santos. He surrendered this morning with concrete evidence of his involvement in sabotaging Elena's car and is willing to testify that he acted under your orders." For the first time, Eduardo saw genuine fear in Regina's eyes, but it lasted only a moment before her mask of control returned. "The word of a mechanic against mine. A nobody against one of the most respected women in the financial world. Good luck with that. We also have the transfers," Danilo continued. 3 payments of 500,000 reals each, triangulated through ghost companies, but eventually ending up in an account under Marcelo's name. Regina did not respond, but her silence spoke volumes. Alberto, who had listened to everything with growing horror, placed a hand on his chest. "Did you kill our daughter?" he whispered. "Our Elena? She was not our daughter," she replied. Regina replied coldly. "She was the daughter of a Spanish driver and a prostitute." Ethica spoke those last words bitterly before meeting Javier Salinas, our Spanish driver. He was handsome and intelligent, despite his lack of formal education, and very young. Eduardo held his breath as he began to understand where this story was heading. Regina offered him money in exchange for certain services that I could not provide. Javier accepted, I suppose believing it would be a discreet arrangement, unaware of who he was dealing with. Alberto turned to them, tears shining in his tired eyes. When he found out Regina was pregnant with twins, he panicked. One baby could be explained as adoption, but 2 would complicate things, and Javier was starting to become too attached to the idea of being a father. "What happened to him?" Danilo asked. "Officially, he resigned and went back to Spain. Unofficially." Alberto left the sentence unfinished, his silence more telling than any confession. Eduardo felt nauseous. The extent of Regina's wickedness exceeded his worst suspicions. "Did you know she got rid of Javier?" "Not at that time," Alberto replied. "I found out years later, when I discovered letters he had tried to send to Regina, asking about his daughters. Letters that were never sent." "And you never said anything?" Eduardo's indignation was palpable. "To whom?" "To the police, against my own wife?" Alberto shook his head. "The head. I chose to protect Elena, to give her the privileged life she deserved. And yes, that meant abandoning the other girl, a sin that I have carried all my life." A soft moan from the bed indicated. "Sure, here is an edited version of the excerpt, maintaining the essence and clarity of the original. He sold her to us, and when she threatened to destroy everything we had built with her obsession to find her true family, I had to protect our legacy." Alberto staggered, his face contorted with pain. Eduardo hurried to support him as the old man collapsed. "We need help here," Danilo shouted, running towards the door. Doctors and nurses burst into the room, quickly transferring Alberto to a stretcher. "Heart attack," Eduardo heard them diagnose as they wheeled his father-in-law away. Regina remained motionless in her bed, watching the scene with distant indifference. She was always weak, she murmured, even now. Eduardo stared at her, unable to comprehend such coldness. The police will come to take your statement, he said. And this time, Regina, there is no money or influence that can save you. As he left the room to follow the doctors attending to Alberto, Eduardo felt a strange sense of emptiness. The truth about Elena's death did not bring the comfort he had hoped for, only more pain and the certainty that the monster responsible had been close all this time, smiling at funerals and birthdays, lurking. Holding Sofia in his arms while his hands were stained with his mother's blood. In the hallway, he met Luisa, who had arrived accompanied by a police officer. Danilo called me, she explained. It's true, Marcelo confessed. Eduardo nodded, his expression grim. He confessed everything. Regina paid him to sabotage the breaks. Title: Family Secrets, int. Hospital Room. De Alberto's face shows exhaustion and worry. Eduardo and Danilo enter. Alberto barely looks up. Alberto, tired voice, I shouldn't be surprised to see you here. I suppose you're here to accuse my wife of another crime. Eduardo, ignoring the hostility. How is she? Alberto, the doctors say she took enough pills to harm herself, but not to kill herself. Very convenient for your theory, isn't it? Danilo stands near the door, watching Regina, asleep under the effects of sedatives. His normally dominant face now looks vulnerable. Eduardo, sitting in front of Alberto, Alberto, we need to talk about Elena and Luisa's biological father. The old man visibly pales. Alberto, I don't know what you're talking about. Danilo, intervening. We know you're sterile. It's in your medical records. You always have been. Alberto closes his eyes, as if the weight of decades of secrets is finally crushing him. Alberto, Regina will tell you we used an anonymous donor, a trusted doctor, conveniently lost records. Eduardo, pressing, but that's the truth. Alberto laughs humorlessly. Alberto, the truth is that Regina always got what she wanted, no matter the cost. Including me, a husband who couldn't give her children, but had the name and fortune she coveted. Alberto stands up with difficulty and walks towards the window, turning his back to them. Alberto, content, when Regina decided she wanted a daughter, she explored all options. Adoption was the easiest, but she insisted the girl have good genes. San Paulo was deliberately austere. Gray walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, and surveillance cameras in every corner. Marcelo Santos seemed diminished in this environment, his shoulders slumped and his gaze fixed on his handcuffed hands. In front of him, Detective Gomez reviewed his signed statement. So, do you confirm that Mrs. Regina Montenegro paid you $1.5 million reais to tamper with Elena Mendez's car brakes? Gomez asked. Marcelo nodded slowly. Yes, but I never thought she would die. They told me it would just be a scare, a small accident to frighten her. In the adjacent room, Eduardo, Luisa, and Danilo watched the interrogation through a one-way glass. He's lying, Eduardo muttered. The brakes were completely disabled. There was no way it was just a scare. The question is whether Regina specifically ordered him to kill her or if Marcelo made that decision on his own, Danilo pointed out. Does it matter? Luisa's voice trembled with contained rage. My sister is dead. My niece grew up without her mother, and I lived for 2 years with the man who helped make that happen. In the interrogation room, Detective Gomez pressed Marcelo. How did you meet Mrs. Montenegro? Marcelo ran a hand over his tired face. She came to the workshop where I worked. She specifically asked for me. She said she needed someone with my skills for a discreet and well-paid job. And how did she know about your skills? I don't know. I guess she asked around. I had. Renowned for his ability to fix what others couldn't and for his discretion, the detective placed a photograph on the table. Luisa leaving her old apartment, clearly captured with a telephoto lens. Was this also Mrs. Montenegro's idea? Marcelo looked away, visibly uncomfortable. After the accident, she asked me to keep an eye on Luisa, to get close to her, and to report if anyone contacted her asking about Elena or the Montenegros. And why did you agree to become the boyfriend of the woman you were spying on? Didn't you find it excessive? For the first time, Marcelo showed genuine emotion, shame. At first, it was just a job, but then I truly got to know her and fell in love with her. He looked up at the mirror, as if he knew Luisa was watching. That wasn't feigned. Luisa moved away from the glass, unable to continue listening. Eduardo tried to follow her, but she was gone. She raised a hand, asking for space. Meanwhile, at the Albert Einstein Hospital, Regina Montenegro was visited by 2 federal agents. Sitting on her bed, she looked impeccably groomed despite her supposed recovery from a suicide attempt, reviewing documents that her assistant had brought her. Mrs. Montenegro, we are here to inform you that you are under investigation for the murder of Elena Mendez Montenegro and conspiracy to commit murder. Regina barely looked up from her papers. My lawyers are already on their way. I won't say anything until they arrive. Here is an improved version of the excerpt, maintaining the essence and clarity. We need access to your financial records, both personal and corporate, the agent continued confidently. And also a warrant to search your residence. For the first time, Regina Montenegro showed genuine alarm. That's ridiculous. You won't find anything because there's nothing to find, she protested. Marcelo Santos has provided substantial evidence, including recordings of your conversations, the second agent informed. Furthermore, your husband, Alberto Montenegro, has agreed to testify against you. Regina paled. Alberto is delusional. He just had a heart attack. No court will accept the testimony of a man in his condition. His statement was taken under oath in the presence of a judge before his heart crisis, clarified the agent, anticipating the possible. More than something like this could happen. For the first time in her life, Regina Montenegro was left speechless. In the hospital waiting room, Eduardo found Luisa sitting alone, gazing out the window towards the city sprawling under the persistent rain. How are you? He asked, sitting down next to her. I don't know, Luisa replied honestly. All of this is too much. Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life. I understand what you mean. They remained silent for a moment, the sound of rain against the windows creating a strange intimacy. What will happen to Alberto? Luisa finally asked. The doctors say he will survive, but he has suffered permanent damage. He will probably need constant care from now on, Eduardo replied. Luisa stopped short at the question. We don't want anything to do with that money, she said firmly. It's tainted with my sister's blood. Once in the car, Luisa let out a long sigh. Do you think they will ever stop chasing us? She asked. They will eventually find something else more interesting, Eduardo replied. But for now, we are the story of the year. The lost heiress, the widowed millionaire, the matriarch murderer. It sounds like a cheap soap opera, except it's our life. They fell silent as the driver took them to the rehabilitation clinic where Alberto resided after his second heart attack. He had been partially paralyzed on his left side. The old man was frail and had speech problems. The doctors did not expect him to walk again without assistance. They found the elderly man in the clinic garden, sitting in his wheelchair under a jacaranda tree. Despite his condition, he had insisted on dressing formally to receive them. A starched white shirt, dress pants, even a tie. Luisa, Eduardo, he greeted with a slurred but clear voice. Is it over? Yes, confirmed Eduardo. Regina got 30 years, Marcelo 10. Alberto nodded slowly, showing no surprise or sadness. I have something for you, he said, pointing to a folder on his lap. Sign these papers. Eduardo took the folder and skimmed through the documents with growing surprise. Are you transferring full control of Montenegro Holdings to a trust? He asked. Why? For Sofia and any child Luisa may have, Alberto replied. One day, Alberto explained, money cannot bring Elena back, but it can secure the future of her descendants. Luisa frowned. I told you I don't want that money, Alberto. It's not for you, the old man replied with unexpected firmness. It's the only thing I can do to make up for my mistakes. Please allow me this. Luisa looked to Eduardo for advice. He shrugged, leaving the decision in her hands. With one condition, Luisa finally said. A substantial portion will go to a foundation for adopted children searching for their biological families. Alberto nodded, a small smile appearing on his face. A smile forming on the part of her face that still responded to her will. It's done. Check page 7, he said. The foundation had already been established in the name of the Elena Oliveira Foundation, with an initial endowment of 20 million reais. Luisa felt tears welling up in her eyes. Despite everything that had happened, this small act of redemption meant more than she could express in words. Thank you, she murmured, taking Alberto's trembling hand. That night, at Eduardo's house, they celebrated a small dinner with Doña Conceição and Sofia. The girl was unusually quiet, processing the events of the past few months in her own way. "Is Grandma Regina never going to get out of jail?" she finally asked as Doña Conceição served dessert. Eduardo exchanged a glance with Luisa before replying, "It's very likely she won't, Princess." "And is it true that she was the one who made Mom's car break down?" Improved text. "That's not all," Eduardo continued. "Regina had a complete file on you. She's been watching you for years, not just for Marcelo. She knew exactly who you were and where you were since you were 15. Luisa covered her mouth with her hand. "Why didn't she do anything if she saw me as a threat? Tanilo believes she kept you as insurance, in case she ever needed another daughter to present to the world, to keep up appearances," Eduardo explained. "A spare," Luisa concluded bitterly. "A spare part for her the perfect fake family." Regina's calculated cruelty seemed to have no limits. Not only had she separated the sisters and ordered the murder of one of them, but she had also kept the other in reserve, ready to be exploited if necessary. "What do we do now?" Luisa asked, overwhelmed by everything she had uncovered. Eduardo took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them in the past few days. "Now we seek justice. For Elena, for you, for Sofia. And we try to build something good out of all this horror." As they spoke, neither of them noticed the figure watching them from the end of the hallway. It was Alberto Montenegro, in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse. He held an old, worn envelope in his lap, and his eyes shone with the determination of a man aware that he had little time left to correct the mistakes of a lifetime. The federal courthouse was packed the day Regina Montenegro received her sentence. Journalists, onlookers, and several members of the title Justice in the Dock, the financial elite of São Paulo crowded into the seats, eager to witness the downfall of one of the most powerful women in the country. Regina remained impassive in the dock, with her back straight and her face composed in a mask of forced dignity. At her age, she knew that the 30-year sentence for first-degree murder likely meant she would die in prison. Eduardo and Luisa watched from the front row. They had decided that Sofia, almost 9 years old, was too young to witness this moment, although she vaguely understood that the evil grandmother had something to do with her mother's accident. "Justice doesn't bring back the dead," murmured Luisa as she watched Regina being escorted out of the room, "but at least she won't be able to harm anyone else." Marcelo Santos, for his cooperation, had received a reduced sentence of 10 years, thus avoiding a first-degree murder charge. During the trial, he had repeatedly looked towards Luisa, searching for some sign of forgiveness in her eyes. She kept her gaze fixed ahead, refusing to even give him that satisfaction. As they left the courthouse, a rain of flashes and questions from journalists greeted them. Eduardo shielded Luisa with an arm as they made their way to the waiting car. "How do you feel knowing that your sister's killer will finally pay?" shouted a reporter. "Is it true that Marcelo Santos was your boyfriend?" asked another. "Do you plan to claim the Montenegro fortune?" added a third, as the car doors closed behind them. The sabotage of Elena's car had been meticulously planned by Luisa to appear as an accident. Horrified, Luisa brought a hand to her mouth, "And I did too upon learning about it. Marcelo had been assigned to watch over you, ensuring you never discovered the connection to Elena. But when we met at the res during the bullfight, the whole plan fell apart." A doctor came out of the emergency room, where they had taken Alberto, a relative of Mr. Montenegro. Eduardo automatically asked, "How is he?" The doctor reported, "He has suffered a severe heart attack. We are doing everything we can, but you should prepare for the worst. His age and previous heart condition complicate the prognosis." Eduardo felt Luisa's hand searching for his, a simple gesture of solidarity that meant everything in that moment. Although Alberto had been an accomplice by omission, he was still Sofia's grandfather, the man who had loved Elena in his own way. "Can I see him?" Luisa asked, surprising Eduardo. The doctor nodded. "Just for a moment, he is semi-conscious." Eduardo watched as Luisa entered the room alone. Through the glass, he saw her approach the bed and take Alberto's hand. The old man opened his eyes, and Eduardo could see the shock on his face at seeing Elena, not Luisa, beside him. He observed as Alberto's lips formed the word, "Forgive me," and in that moment, Eduardo knew that Luisa, with all her strength and compassion, was truly family. Not because of the blood she shared with Elena, but because of the heart that beat with the same generosity. The scene shifted to the federal police interrogation room, where. Title. Revelations *int. Hospital room. Day. Luisa nods, lost in her thoughts. Luisa, you know? When I saw him in that hospital bed. Hospital, so vulnerable, I couldn't hate it. I should. Part of me knows I should hate it for abandoning me, for choosing Elena over me, but it's the last link to my origins. Eduardo nods, understanding. Eduardo, I understand. And he's the only grandfather Sofia will know. Luisa Regina will go to prison if there is justice in this world. The mention of Sofia brings a small smile to Eduardo's face. Eduardo, she's with Doña Conceição. I told her you were helping to solve a very important problem about her mom. She said she was proud of her Aunt Luisa. Tears form in Luisa's eyes. In the midst of all this madness, a child's acceptance is the anchor she needs. Eduardo's phone rings. It's Danilo. Eduardo, after a brief conversation, they found something in the Montenegro mansion. A secret compartment in Regina's study contained documents about the twins' biological mother. Our mother. Luisa leans forward, suddenly alert. Luisa, is she alive? Eduardo, I don't know. Danilo says the documents indicate she was a Colombian immigrant named Isabel Restrepo, who worked as a maid for a family friends of the Montenegros. Luisa Isabel. Savoring the name, my mother's name was Isabel. Eduardo watches Luisa as she processes this new information. Each revelation is both a gift and a wound. The knowledge she always sought, tinged with the tragedy of loss. Everything that has been lost. The world had changed so much that it was hard to imagine going back to the old routine. I think it's time to move on, said the restaurant that he had always dreamed of opening. Now I can make it a reality. I'm happy for you. A silence followed, heavy with meaning. Eduardo, Luisa began, carefully choosing her words. What is between us? I know, he gently interrupted. It's complicated. I look at you and see someone who deeply loved my sister, someone who still loves her. And I look at you and see the person who brought some light back into our lives. But I also see her face, her gestures. Luisa nodded, understanding perfectly. Any relationship between them would always be in the shadow of Elena. And Sofia would be even more confused, Eduardo added. The decision was made without the need for words. Their bond would be familial, not romantic. Aunt and niece, siblings-in-law. A family united by grief and love, but not in the way it could have been under other circumstances. I will always be here for you and for Sofia, promised Luisa. Eduardo took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. I know, and we will always be here for you. Under the stars of São Paulo, two wounded souls found a peace that neither had believed possible. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was real, and for now, that was enough. The Duas Estrelas restaurant shone with warm lights on a night of summer, located in a renovated building in the neighborhood. Under the starry sky of São Paulo, a family gathered, united by pain, loss, and redemption. It wasn't the happily ever after of fairy tales, but, as Eduardo reflected, it was better because it was real. It wasn't perfect, it was full of scars, bittersweet memories, and permanent absences. But tonight, that was more than enough. Friends, what do you think of this gripping story about a millionaire, a waitress identical to his deceased wife, and the dark secrets that were revealed? If this narrative captivated you as much as it did me, don't forget to leave a like. Comment on what impressed you the most about this story of family, secrets, and redemption, and share this video with friends and family who enjoy unexpected twists. If you want to discover more fascinating stories where fate, family, and secrets intertwine in surprising ways, don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel. We would love to know which country you are watching this from today: Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Spain, or another corner of the Hispanic world. Tell us in the comments. Title: Encounters Under the Stars *int. Restaurant, 2 stars. Night * Luisa serves drinks as a sense of nostalgia envelops the atmosphere. Luisa *, do you remember what day it is today? Sofia *, her face lighting up. The anniversary of the day we met. When you said I looked like mom at the restaurant. Luisa *, she smiles warmly. Exactly, dear. Little genius. 5 years have passed since then. Eduardo raises his glass, reflecting the sparkle of the stars in his eyes. Eduardo * for the unexpected encounters that change our lives. Luisa * and for the family we found. Sophia **, raising her glass of cider, for Elena, who somehow brought us all together. For Mom. The glasses are raised under a starry sky, the same stars that inspired the name of the restaurant. 2 stars, in honor of the 2 sisters. Cut 2. **** int. Semi-open prison. Day * Regina Montenegro, 70 years old and in frail health, receives few visitors, only her lawyers. Her financial empire has slipped from her hands. Int. Rehabilitation clinic. Day * Alberto Montenegro, in intensive therapy, has regained some mobility and speech. Luisa and Sophia visit him regularly. A relationship that started awkwardly has transformed into a genuine bond, based on forgiveness and the shared desire to rebuild something positive from the tragedy. Int. Federal prison. Day * Marcelo Santos serves his sentence. Every year, on the anniversary of Elena's death, he sends a letter of apology to Luisa. She keeps them, unanswered, as a reminder that even the most terrible decisions have far-reaching consequences. Luisa had used part of the Montenegro Trust to fund research dedicated to reuniting separated families. Through this work, she discovered that her biological mother, Isabel Restrepo, had passed away years ago in Colombia, but also that she had living half-siblings who were now part of her extended family. Eduardo continued to lead his real estate company, but had restructured his life to spend more time with Sophia. Although the void left by Elena would never completely disappear, he had learned to build a new life around that space. Doña Concepcion remained the pillar of the Mendez household, now more as an honorary grandmother than as an employee. Sophia was thriving. The girl who once pointed at a waitress and changed the course of so many lives was now growing up surrounded by love, with her mother's memory alive in her aunt's eyes, and a father who had finally learned to smile again. That night, as the celebration on the rooftop continued, Eduardo watched Luisa and Sophia laughing together. The resemblance between aunt and niece was striking, but no longer painful. Instead, Eduardo saw in that resemblance a kind of continuity, a promise that something of Elena would live on through these 2 people he loved so much. "What are you thinking?" Luisa asked, noticing his contemplative gaze. "I'm thinking that sometimes the most painful endings can lead to new beginnings we never could have imagined," Eduardo replied. Luisa smiled, understanding perfectly. An awkward silence fell over the table. They had tried to shield Sophia from the most gruesome details. But the media coverage of the trial made it impossible to hide everything from her. "Yes, sweetheart," Luisa replied gently. "Your grandmother did something very wrong, but now she can't hurt anyone anymore." Sophia nodded, processing the information. "And are you my mom now?" she asked, looking at Luisa with inquisitive eyes. The question struck everyone with its innocence and clarity. "No, Sophia," Luisa replied, taking the little girl's hand. "I am your aunt. Your mom will always be your mom, even though she's not here anymore. But you look like her, and I love you very much, just like she did." "I love you very much," Luisa confirmed, "but I can't replace your mom." "Nobody can. What I can do is tell you stories about her, help you remember her, and be by your side whenever you need me." Sophia seemed satisfied with this answer and resumed her dessert with renewed enthusiasm, momentarily leaving behind the world of adults. Later, when Sophia was already asleep, Eduardo and Luisa sat on the terrace with glasses of wine in hand. "You've been amazing with her," Eduardo commented. "It's easy, she's a wonderful child," Luisa replied. A comfortable silence settled between them. In the past few months, they had developed a relationship that was difficult to define. More than friends, united by tragedy and discovery, but always careful not to cross certain lines. "What will you do now?" Eduardo finally asked. "Are you going back to your apartment?" Luisa considered the question, reflecting. Title: A Night in Magdalena Int. Magdalena Restaurant. Night Magdalena had become one of the most coveted spots in the city in just 2 years. Luisa Oliveira, in her elegant chef uniform, emerged from the kitchen to greet the special guests at the corner table. Eduardo, now 45, and Sophia, who had just turned 11. Sophia was wearing a dress she had specially chosen for the occasion. Sophia, excited, Aunt Luisa, the ravioli was delicious. Sophia stood up to hug Luisa. Luisa, surprised and happy, "I'm glad you liked them, chef in training." On weekends, Sophia spent hours in the restaurant kitchen, learning culinary basics under her aunt's guidance. Eduardo, raising his wine glass, congratulations on the Michelin star. Elena would be proud. The mention of Elena no longer brought the sharp pain it once did. With time, they had learned to honor her memory without letting sadness dominate them. Luisa, with a sparkle in her eyes, I have a surprise for later, but first, the special dessert that Sophia helped create last week. Luisa returned to the kitchen as Eduardo watched his daughter, amazed at how time flew by. Each day she looked more like Elena, but she had a unique spark, a perfect blend of her two parents and Luisa's positive influence in her life. Ext. Rooftop of the restaurant NTE. Night asterisk. After closing the restaurant, the three of them went up to the rooftop. Luisa had prepared a small private celebration with candles, a bottle of champagne for the adults, and non-alcoholic cider for Sophia.